Hey, welcome back to the Cellarcast, episode 55. This one might be coming out a little late for those of you who like to catch this as soon as it's out. Um, I was like, so for the last video I put out, which will have been last night on the Brazilian Mega Man comic, I was like, oh, I'll have plenty of time to make this video. You know, I've come back from break. I got plenty of time. And then things got kind of pushed forward and and like certain coordination couldn't happen, and I was like, okay, so we're running a few days later than I wanted to, but it's okay. I thought that video was going to be way longer than it ended up being. I can't believe it came down to like close to 40 minutes. Sorry, I haven't eaten anything this morning yet. So I'm like, let me just go get some crackers from the kitchens to carb up. It's also making my throat really dry. Anyway, well, I've been getting some warm reactions to the Mega Man video, so thank you for that, everyone who's been watching that. We're gonna jump into a couple. Excuse me, I'm a mess today. We're gonna jump into some news and some game stuff, some regular old Cellarcast content. Oh, I love those. You know those people who are like they're too into being like an online person. I don't know how to say that. They're always just talking about like the con. Here's my impression of like a Twitch guy. Oh no, but the content, dude. No, dude, the content is dry. Yeah. Regular old Cellarcast rigmarole. Rigmarole. We're gonna jump into a story I never thought I'd see. Mainly gonna be news and some game thoughts this week. Skull and Bones has gotten a release date. If you don't remember what Skull and Bones is, this was a... Well, let's take you back to... When did this thing... Hang on, I gotta do some research. I forget when. Ubisoft Singapore. Ubisoft's... Holy shit. So back in 2008, Ubisoft opened a studio in Singapore because of, I believe, they got like so they worked out this deal where I'm pretty sure what happened, I might be wrong on this. They oh my god. Sorry, I'm just seeing great things to talk about. They saw what the fuck? They opened the studio in Singapore, and I'm pretty sure they got some kind of like a tax write-off or reduced taxes or something on it because they cooperated with the government. They signed this agreement with the government to... It was this thing where they would get these like benefits if they put out a game. They had to produce a game. Like, they agreed upon, we will release games and we will hire Singaporean talent. So it was like a local, like, economic development thing for the Singaporean government. This game was Skull and Bones. Skull and Bones has been in development for a good 7 years now. You're like, how does it... Oh god, how does a game get in development for 7 years? Basically, completely nonsensical leadership and a terrible work environment. I believe I remember reading all this when there was an article about Ubisoft's rampant sexism problems that came out a while ago. And how they covered up a bunch of sexual assaults that happened in their... Sorry, I don't know, assaults. I should be careful with my words. I'm pretty sure assaults. Take that with a grain of salt. At the very least, rampant harassment, sexual harassment that went on at their offices, and just a really horrible sounding work culture that they covered up and were like, no, it's fine. So when I look up Skull and Bone or Ubisoft Singapore, and I see a video from them from like a year ago saying, women of Ubisoft Singapore, hashtag break the bias. Studio life, women in tech. Oh god. Yeah, this stuff is not hard to find. So Skull and Bones was like, oh, I remember the way the project was going was basically the management was so bad there was no direction for what the game should be besides pirate game, that people, I recall, like, their turnover rate was so high. I remember there was a quote from someone who said Skull and Bones was the only development team that got younger as time progressed, because older, more experienced staff members would leave the project because it was so bad. I'm pretty sure it ended up being like the Shrek of the studio, because they were like, in a bad way, because they were, if you were like underperforming at the other Ubisoft studios, they would ship you to fucking Singapore. Take him to Singapore. If you don't know, back when DreamWorks was like animating Shrek, they were working on two projects. One was Prince of Egypt, and the other was Shrek. And Prince of Egypt was looked at as the much more favorable project to be much more prestigious project. To be fair, that movie's great. And Shrek was like the fucking, man, we're making this ogre movie, and so. If people were like if people got sent to go work on Shrek, they called it getting Shreked, which I'm not. That was a real thing. So yeah, you got fucking Singapored at Ubisoft. They would send you to Singapore to work on this disaster of a project. I recall one quote saying something like, there were points in development where we didn't know if it wasn't clear if you were playing as a person or a boat. Like, the player avatar was not clear. It was that bad. It went through just like all this, so like just this revolving door of project leaders where they would start getting something going and then it would be so awful that they would just leave, and then a new person would come in to lead the project, and they would just, we're doing my thing now, and just over and over and over again. Like, I guess Duke Nukem Forever isn't a great example, but hey, it's on the mind because there's some news about that this week. Yeah, so I have been, so the best part of this story is that this game, you're like, why hasn't this game just been canceled? Well, remember that agreement they signed with the Singaporean government? Excuse me. Yeah. There are consequences if they don't make good on the promise of releasing this game. There are consequences. Which, now the consequences are, I don't know if they're definite. Like, they're defined, but they basically, the government can prosecute them however they want, including caning, including being caned. That's a thing that you could do in Singapore to punish people for crimes, is smacking them with a cane. If they don't release Skull and Bones, they will be caned by the government, which is so funny. It's so, I mean, it must be awful to work on this project under that threat. But as someone who does not have to face that threat, it's really funny. So, like, what was it? Illyria, Kingdoms of Illyria or something, I think it was. Am I just misremembering? It's got a generic Kingdoms of Illyria. Oh yeah. Kingdoms of Illyria or Chronicles of Illyria. I think they switched it. It was this like nightmarish Kickstarter MMO that was basically, I think they got like funding, like public funding or something like that, or no, private funding. They ended up in this situation where the game was a total in like a death spiral in development, and you're like, there's no way this is coming out because they just feature crept it to death. And it just got way, way too big for a little indie studio to make. But now they are like forced. They would have just canceled the project and taken the money, but now the creator is forced to keep working on it and supplying like a drip feed of updates, because if he doesn't, he might get sued because of I don't know. I think like certain things with the way that the funding was done. If he doesn't deliver it, if he doesn't at least show that he's working on it, he could face legal repercussions. So I love it. So Ubisoft Singapore has been in that same position for the last 7 years. It's like, fuck, if we don't put out this pirate game, they're gonna come beat us. The government's gonna come beat us. Just, it's fucking ridiculous. So in my mind, I'm like, this is one of those vaporware projects that's just never gonna happen. And then suddenly, a few days ago, Skull and Bones release date announced. They've been supplying, now to be fair, they've been supplying some more updates on it in the recent, I want to say year and a half ish. So yeah, it was originally supposed to come out in 2018. Did not. And I think they're like, it'll be out sometime. This never came out. So they have finally given it a release date. It is 2023. Is there a date with it? Like a specific date? They've just said 2023. Does this article say that? This is an IGN article I'm reading off of right now. No, they do not say. They do not say. I was like, they have to say it in this article. Dude, the first comment here is, they should have added sword play and boarding other ships with my avatar with a group of other play. Dude! This is like the 12th game that they've made of this game. Yeah. So, the gameplay, I've literally not looked at any gameplay. I don't care about this game. I'm not going to play it. I have no interest. I just think the story behind it is funny. It looks like pirate stuff. Let's see. Captain their own ships, accept contracts, gather resources, sail the high seas while attacking merchant ships for loot. I'm sure it's going to be just like a Ubisoft game. It's going to be an Ubisoft game. Oh boy, I'm seeing RPG elements. I'm seeing... These are just screenshots with no UI. Oh, what progression systems? Yeah, I'm not saying these things are bad. They're just very Ubisoft. Oh yeah, this is that Ubisoft UI, baby. Yeah, minimalist with a little like paint smear. Yeah. I don't really care about this game. I just think the story is funny. I think the idea of being forced to work on like a literal sinking ship of a project under threat of like being attacked by the government is really amusing from a distance. I would not want to be in that position, but hey. What do we got next? Oh, so last week we didn't get to cover a couple topics that I wanted to. But I want to quickly go over technically 2 different stories, but from was this from a month ago? What the fuck? But for very similar topics. On Europe is starting to crack down on monetization. So this article, I didn't realize this was a fucking month ago, from the beginning of June. I never saw this. But hey, month's news, it's still good. This one comes from Reuters or Reuters. I never knew how to pronounce that. Spain to crack down on video game loot boxes blamed for pathological behavior, by Emma Pinedo. Spain is set to become the first European country to have a law regulating the use of so-called loot boxes in video games, aiming to avoid, quote, thoughtless, compulsive, or even pathological consumer behavior. I was under the impression that the Netherlands had already done that, or they might have just restricted it. Consumer Minister Alberto Garzón said the government will, in a few weeks, regulate gaming features that offer prizes with an economic value in a real or virtual market and that can be resold or exchanged. Oh no, they're coming for your CSGO skins, including non-fungible tokens or cryptocurrencies. That's my favorite part. So, from the sounds of this, they're saying regulate. I don't know what regulate means. It could mean it's out, or it's heavily limited in some kind of a way. The NFT thing is funny because we regulate features that offer... This is... Oh my god. You know, I just realized, actually, just thinking about it right now, this is... NFTs are about to get regulated, guys. This is the first one. One of the big problems with the NFT and the whole blockchain market, speculators market, is there's no regulation with this, because it's all the entire premise is very like, yeah, no regulations, and then you lose all your money and you're like, maybe some regulations would be cool. This, as far as I'm aware, there aren't any countries that have actually regulated NFTs at all. So that's one of the reasons they're so, like, I would never get into them. I think it's just a stupid, dangerous, speculative market. Just highly volatile, where value is entirely made up, as opposed to the regular market where value is partially made up. But one of the reasons for its volatility is just there's no one to bail you out. There's no one that you can go to for, like, to report a fraud. I guess there is, but it's so new, and it's so, no one knows, like, how to handle them. It's completely different from, like, you know, when what was that game? Axie Infinity was this huge NFT mobile game. It was like a knockoff Pokemon with shitty gameplay. They were like, oh, we accidentally lost like $6 million or something like that, like some absurd amount of money out of their, like, total what is it, pool? I forget all the terms for this stuff, but basically like a huge sum of money just disappeared overnight because of a security exploit, and there's nothing you can do about that. So Spain regulated... I don't know if this is NFTs just in the context of gaming, because that would be different from, you know, like any other kind. Honestly, there haven't even been that many NFT games. There probably have. Actually, no, I'm remembering GDC, and like half that fucking conference was just crypto shit, block shits. there aren't that many that I know of. That might just be because I don't follow it. So I'm not up to date on the newest NFT release. But I feel like it's overall a pretty niche thing, so that definitely would, if it was just in the sector of gaming that they're regulating it, probably wouldn't be that high impact, but it might be a precedent for other national courts to follow. Yeah. Let's see. This is interesting. So in a statement, Garzón said the law would allow gamers to have fun while preserving their health, and in particular, that of the most vulnerable, though he didn't give details of exactly what the regulation would entail. So when they say vulnerable, they're basically talking about people who are vulnerable. I guess children and people who have vulnerable to gambling or just addictive behavior in general. I think you can probably be. I think I guess you would different like a gambling addiction has maybe a different from other. What am I trying to say? I was thinking for a second that being susceptible to addiction in general, but I feel like if someone's susceptible to addiction, maybe not all addictions are the same. I haven't done enough research into that. This is a podcast. Is me just talking about things I don't know about. Why do you listen to this? 3 out of 10 Spanish students spent money in 2021 to improve their ranking, character, accessories, or image in video games after the initial purchase, according to the survey of the National Plan on Drugs that also monitors online addiction. Yeah, I am. There was an article this week from, who was it? I forget. I think Vice, actually, that basically said that self-regulation in the games industry has been a failure, which is, yeah, that's true. I think you could have called that back in 2013, 2014. I'm playing Tetris in the background to stimulate my hands. So that's what you're hearing. I think you could have called that way back when, about close to 10 years ago. But everything that has kind of unfolded in the realm of monetization has only really proved that point. Or exacerbate it. We're well past the point where it's oh, maybe we can self-regulate. Yeah, they aren't going to. Video games are the most hyper-capitalist market I've ever seen. Maybe next to pharmaceutical companies. I don't know. And it's been one of those how bad, having observed this for so many years, there's been this kind of creeping sensation of how extreme is this going to get? How bad is this going to get? Right? How is there a point where there's going to be too much, where it's going to be too much, and someone, a government organization, most likely has to step in and put down some regulations, and we might be approaching that point. One of the big frustrating things with a lot of big industries is that they operate on very short-term thinking, short-term strategies. And the reason for that is because the leadership is very short-term. A lot of people now in the corporate world, there's a lot of how would I say, positions or something? Yeah, positions and levels of leadership where people are they're very focused on min-maxing for the maximum amount of profit they can get. So this is a thing that engineers will do, for instance. They'll go to one company, leave that company, and then work for a different one for a few years, and then come back to the first company when they have more, when they're more competitive, so to speak, when the engineer is has more of like they can get a more competitive salary. Basically, they're just gaming the system essentially to like leave and then come back with more experience plus the well, I could just leave again if you don't want to pay me as much. And this is like in I think like the corporate CEO or just people who make decisions. There's a lot of people in gaming, at least, who they join for a few years and then they leave. It's rare to see someone work at a big publisher, something like EA, for like an extended period of time, like 10 years, 20 years or something. A lot of them will just join and then leave because a better offer came up. There are plenty of people, I'm sure, who do stay for extended periods of time, but that I want to say is more on the closer to the ground floor of the company. There's like a tier in the company where like you don't have to play games to be here. You don't have to really know anything about video games to be here. You just need to make money. That's Bobby Kotick, basically. So they join for a few years, then they leave. And they already know that they're going to do this, so when they join, they're going to make some decisions that will benefit them as much in the next 5 to 6-7 years as possible. And then they just dip, and then screw it. I don't care about what happens. I don't care about the consumer's experience. I don't care about the degradation of my company or anything like that. I made as much money as I could while I was there, and now I'm gone. And I think that they're kind of like a cycle or a mentality or strategy, whatever you want to call it, has exacerbated the problems with monetization. I think that was, there's this kind of like misconception or a fallacy or something, one of these like good old days of gaming or whatever, that like, back in the 80s or something, developer, they just cared about making games fun. It's like, that's not really true. I was thinking about this recently because I saw this take recently that like in the 80s they just used to care about games being fun and they didn't care about the money. It's like, yeah, you don't know the history of the industry. Way back when, I made a video on a game. It was called the Mortal Kombat Murders and Other Video Game Lawsuits, I believe it was called. So basically, the kind of intro of that video, the first half of that video, was about a case from like 1970, what was the exact year? Or 1980 something. 1980, I want to say 1 or 2. But a game called KC's Crazy Chase. So basically, 82, look how good I am. So basically, the Magnavox Odyssey 2, which was the sequel to the Magnavox Odyssey, the very first home game console, the Odyssey 2, their entire library was basically programmed by this one guy. What was his name? Come on. Where's the... Do they really not include his name in the freaking... in the Wikipedia article? Really? Wait, which one of these came out first? KC Munchkin. Sorry, KC Munchkin was the first one. Crazy Chase was the sequel. Where the fuck is this guy's name? I can't remember this guy's name. Anyway, there was this Ed Averitt. That was his name. He doesn't have his own Wikipedia article? Really? Ed Averitt programmed almost the entirety of the Magnavox 2's library. There's like 30-something games on it, and he made like 33 or something like that. The dude was like pumping these things out and making them apparently quite a bit of money at the time. This is, of course, before the crash. Anyway, so the Atari... So, okay. So basically, Philips and Magnavox, who had partnered to make the console, they came to him and they were like, hey, you heard of that Pac-Man? And he was like, yeah, I heard of Pac-Man. It's like the biggest game ever right now. And they're like, well, we want that Pac-Man money, but we don't have the rights to publish it in America. Atari has the rights to publish it, and we can't get the rights from them. So what we want you to do is we want you to make a game that is similar enough to Pac-Man that we can basically we could bank off of the Pac-Man being a Pac-Man-like, because Pac-Man on the Atari Pac-Man was not out yet. It was not out yet. So there's no Pac-Man on home consoles. They're like, we want a Pac-Man on home consoles. So we need you to make something that is close enough to Pac-Man that it has the same like market appeal, basically, for people who want Pac-Man at the home, but different enough that people, basically different enough that we can legally defend it from being like copyright infringement in court. And so Ed Averitt looked at this, and I believe he described it as like a three-way battle. It was the executives at Magnavox / Philips. It was the executives who wanted they wanted the Pac-Man market, the lawyers who wanted something that they could defend in court, and then he personally wanted to make a game that was better than Pac-Man. It's like a point of pride. So he made a game called Casey Munchkin. And Casey, spelled it's like the initials KC, inspired by part of the reason I think they were able to do this was because they it was named the head of Philips was named, yes, Philips. So the president of Philips at the time was named Kenneth C. Mencken. Kenneth C. Mencken, so K.C. Munchkin. And he was like, okay, if you'll name it after me, how cute. So he makes this game, Casey Munchkin, and it is very similar to Pac-Man in many ways. If you look up gameplay of it, it's got a different maze layout. It's, got some different-ish looking characters. It has some interesting changes, like, I believe it's either like, I think it's like when you're moving, the maze is invisible, but when you're still, you can see the maze, or it's that or the opposite of it. I remember it being a little disorienting to play, but it's still kind of interesting. So they put out this game. I don't know how well it did. Sales data is not easy to find back then. But so like it was supposed to be distinct enough from Pac-Man that they would not get sued. Well, they got sued, and they ended up actually winning the first case. They got the courts to say that it was not copyright infringement. Then Atari appealed, and then in the appellate court, they lost the suit. The court said that it was actually copyright infringement, and the reason for that is actually pretty interesting. It's like an early example of basically the ruling on the game. The ruling on the game was that I believe it was something like so the Philips argument initially was that because the game didn't use any of Pac-Man's assets, they didn't use any of the art, they didn't use any of the actual lines of code, that it was not copyright infringement. And then the courts decided that because it had a similar enough like market appeal, essentially, and it was like deliberately trying to take sales away from Pac-Man, that it was infringement. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, because there was no home console version of Pac-Man at the time, but that was their decision, and it was a kind of precedent-setting case for gaming, for video games, because it kind of like did more to define like what games were as like a product, I guess. Really interesting case, and I always think of it when I hear these arguments about how they used, in the old days, they just cared about how good the game was. It's like, no, they wanted to make, they always wanted to make money. It's just that things have developed to the point where it's easier than ever to fleece people, essentially, for every cent. I remember back in 2013, 2014. I remember when patches for games started becoming a thing. I remember that there was a point in time where, in like the 7th generation, where patching was still very new, people didn't really know how to do it. It wasn't very common. A lot of people would buy games and they wouldn't even have, internet connection. Things like Xbox Live and PSN were still pretty new at the time. And so, like, the adoption was a little slow. There were plenty of people who did, but it wasn't like a universal thing. And it's funny because it feels very quaint to think back about that, where the idea of like a console having an internet browser was so novel. Excuse me. So patches for games used to be very rare as I recall, unless it was like a big expansion. I mean, like the whole development process was very different just because of the fact that you couldn't patch things. So it was like, if there were updates to a game, maybe there were bug fixes, like little patches for bug fixes, but for the most part, it would come in the form of like a larger DLC or something like that. And then I remember the first case I remember that was really like, was Assassin's Creed Unity or Syndicate. I don't remember which one came out first. They all blur together. It was the one, I think it was in France. Wasn't that Syndicate? Where there was like that really infamous bug where like the character model's face wouldn't load, but like the eyes and the teeth would. And it was horrifying. Yeah, and I remember just that image, and it was like, I can't believe they let a game come out this fucked up. And then you could tell that their whole strategy was, we'll just patch it later, they'll buy it. And I remember this feeling of like dread that was like, oh no, this is gonna be a thing, isn't it? Developers are just gonna release game. Publishers are gonna push devs on faster and faster timelines because they can put out games less and less and less polished, because they'll just fix it later and they'll take your money now, and it's just gonna be now. We don't have to offer anything. We just have to offer you the promise that it will be good eventually, and it's just this like, oh no. And guess what? That's exactly what happened. And now it's just normal. I remember when day one patches were like shocking. I remember when day one patches were a shocking thing. I remember when Mass Effect 3 had day one DLC, and people were like upset. People were legitimately upset, and for good reason, because it's like, I bought this game and there's shit you already made that is not. And like, I get why day one DLC exists, because like they're working on stuff while the game is like getting rated, and while they're doing their like compliance tests or compliance checks and all that. I get why it happens, but it's not good like optics wise at the time, at least. Now we're just used to it. So it's like, yeah, actually a little sad. This is why I don't play AAA games. I just don't bother with it. Now, thankfully, one of the nice things about gaming is that it is a medium where you can actually just completely ignore AAA releases and just go play indie games or AA games or something like that, which is basically just what I do. There was actually a second story I was going to talk about. This one is... Is this June? It's July. From last week. Then from VGC by Jordan Midler. 6 Dutch political parties unite behind proposed loot box ban. Excuse me. The Netherlands could be the next country to ban loot boxes in video games. So they were not. They did not ban them. As multiple political parties unite behind the bill, which would see the country outlaw randomized in-game purchases. So there's a motion in the Dutch courts, which is not passed yet, but apparently is very bipartisan. So supposedly, according to this article, at least it is unlikely to fail, as they say. Belgium banned loot boxes. It wasn't the Netherlands. That's what it was. So the motion says, quote, in video games, children are manipulated into making microtransactions, and that loot boxes are also a form of gambling. It goes on to claim that as a result of these payments, quote, they can get addicted and can burden families with unexpected bills for these transactions. The Fortnite. The V-Bucks. So yeah, the article kind of goes on to talk about coordinated action in Europe. Suppose 20 consumer groups from across 18 European countries basically pushing for more regulations on loot boxes. Quote, a ban on the deceptive design, extra protections for minors, and transactional transparency. In July 2020, following repeated calls for action from the government, the House of Lords, which is so funny that it's like a thing, recommended that the UK government, quote, act immediately to bring loot boxes within the remit of gambling legislation and regulation. Like, loot boxes are 100% gambling, right? They're 100% gambling. Does anyone... No one denies this, right? If you can pay for it with real money and it gives you random rewards, it's gambling. I don't see any, like... I honestly haven't seen anyone really claim that it's not. Actually, no, that's a lie. There was, who was it? EA, who called them that epic surprise mechanics. Oh, that was so funny. It's like a Kinder Egg, you know? It's like a Kinder Egg. That was so funny when they were like, yeah, you know when you like buy a chocolate egg and it comes with like a bonus little toy? Yeah, that's exactly like spending money on a digital thing that you might not get. That is exactly the same thing. It's not like one is a little fun little bonus for getting chocolate and the other one is like spinning a wheel. Yeah, so Diablo Immortal won't be released in the Netherlands or Belgium because of the loot boxes, which is great. And, oh, wait, what the hell? Wasn't there a story? I'm going to look this up right now. Hang on. Diablo Immortal banned in China? Oh, okay. Was that a... This is really funny. I'm going to spend a second on this. So Diablo Immortal which was a game made for the Chinese market. They eat that shit up. Supposedly, the official Diablo Immortal Weibo account, which is a Chinese social media, Weibo, their official Weibo account made a post that called Xi Jinping Winnie the Pooh. I think it said, when would the bear fall off the seat? Which is a jab at Xi. The June 26th post continues... Oh, so there's a post on Reddit about this. Suggests that marketing for the handheld game has now been completely shut down in China, with further action rumored to be taken against NetEase. That's funny. There's no official statement on it, and it might not be a real thing. However, the account was blocked for violating relevant laws and regulations. And apparently the game has been delayed. Just so funny. That was from .esports, by the way. Courtesy Ryan Galloway. Oh, that shit is so funny. That is so fun. The cat... They won't get away with it forever. If you can take any solace, have it be in the fact that they won't get away with it forever. Yeah. I'm pretty much done talking about that. I hope this shit gets regulated. I'm just sick of it. I'm sick of of a thing that I love. I think a thing that I love being, what would you call it? Kind of, it feels like pulled down, yeah, by just like shitty business practices. The games industry is very amusing, but it's also really terrible. I want to talk about something really dope. So remember when I talked about the Duke Nukem Forever 2001 build that got leaked a few weeks ago, I think. The DNF build got leaked from 2001. If you missed that episode or don't remember, quick refresh. So Duke Nukem Forever, infamous disaster game, took 14 years to develop and came out garbage. Went through several different builds because they just kept... they were working on it for so long with a bunch of feature creep that eventually they would get outpaced. Technology would outpace them, and they would have to update all their engines and stuff, and then they basically had to start from scrap, and they did that, like, 3 times or something like that. So there was a build that was showed off in 2001 that looked really cool and was eventually scrapped. Supposedly there is a version of it that is 95% complete, but it's locked away in the Gearbox vaults, and Randy Pitchford won't let it slide. You'd think with his hands being so greasy, it wouldn't be that hard to pry away from him, but all we were able to get was a less complete version of it. There is a confirmed much more complete version of it that was not leaked, but a less complete version was. And it came with... It was very fascinating. There's a lot of videos you can look at. There's a lot of videos like looking at just exploring the build and all the stuff in it. It's pretty interesting. And part of the leak was that it came with like a fully fledged level builder. Now, a week ago, I learned of. I kind of was like, if anything noteworthy happens with this build, I'll hear about it. Well, let me introduce you to the DNF2001 Restoration project. So, gonna give just a quick from their like about section, basically. Excuse me. The DNF2001 Restoration project was created roughly a day or two after the August 21st, 2001 and October 26, 2001 versions of Duke Nukem Forever, dated a whole 10 years before the release of the final game, were leaked by XOR Jump on the V board of 4chan. So yeah, there were two versions of the game that were leaked. This resulted in a flurry of renewed interest in Duke and the game itself, and quickly attracted both vets and new blood alike interested in modifying the game's source code. It was a whole source code leak. It wasn't just like a playable exe, like the entire thing. While starting off small, it quickly blossomed into an organized team the size of a small studio, boasting over 100 volunteer members in various positions at peak. All of these members hail from various parts of the world, with remote work taking place any time of the day. Many of these are industry experts with plenty of well-known community figures and modders thrown into the mix, hoping to leave their mark on the final restoration. Current progress has been focused on finishing the polish for the first chapter of the game, High Stakes Lady Killer, and working on a plethora of render and engine fixes alike, with many major and small fixes already developed, such as a proper hair fix and progress on an entirely new renderer for the game in DirectX 9. Much of the content seen in the E3 trailers and promotional material for the game have been restored, with an all-new story being developed by a combined story team of 23 members to bridge the gaps between what we know about the game and what we don't. This leak holds a lot of importance to the community, the 2001 and 2002 versions being considered the time when DNF was in its prime, so to speak, and as such has been sought after for nearly a decade. Now it is here, and it is getting restored by the community, so that one day you can play the full game on modern machines with, hopefully, no issues. We are well aware of this importance, and as such we as a team strive to deliver only the best of Duke, with no post-2003 content or politics being featured in any main stable release of the build. What they mean by that is, well, I mean, Duke Nukem's always had a little bit of... Duke Nukem's always been intensely satirical. Well, at least Duke 3D was. So they don't want to include modern-day references. I'm sure there's some stuff there ragging on, like, the Bush administration or Clinton or something like that. They don't want to include, like, Obama or Trump or Biden-era political jokes. It would just be kind of cringe and would kind of be like I don't know. I'm not generally a fan of the term like forced, like forcing things in, but I think in this case it would be forced because you're literally like forcing it into a time, like if it's a restoration project. Like, look, if you want to make a mod or you want to make your own level pack, go wild. But this is like a restoration of a game that was supposed to come out in like the early 2000s. It would be weird and indulgent, I think, to include modern-day political commentary. It would be really cringy. But this is a really exciting story. I'm really happy about this. Side mods are planned with new content, though these are expected only for after the main release of the restoration. Thank you for not getting overburdened with yourself, guys. So this is such a cool project. I totally want to play this when it comes out. So there's some really exciting things going on with this this restoration. One of the things that I find really neat, and that like they're really going all out. I mean, they said there's like 100 volunteers, lots of industry professionals, community modders, or modders from the community. So the original build, you'll notice, Duke is voice acted. He has some lines. I think they were newly recorded. I believe they were newly recorded for that build. But all the NPCs are just like text to speech, which I imagine is generally how like development, it's very placeholder. It seems like something that I would assume that's how most games handle it. So everyone else is text to speech, and they're actually holding auditions to be a role in the game. What if I did this? What if I just randomly like was in the tuk-tuk for everything? That would be funny. As just like a minor role. Should I leave a comment? Should I audition for this? Maybe I'll see if I can audition for this. That would actually be a really fun way to get into this this project, because I don't have any fucking game dev experience. I'm gonna hit pause real quick to use the bathroom, and I'm back, just like that. Yeah. So let's see, where was I? So they have a few articles on their ModDB page. For stuff that they've been working on. They already have, looks like they're doing monthly updates so far, or they at least have one out for June. And already the June update is like crazy. They fixed a bunch of bugs with the way that hair and shadows look. They fixed, that was like the main, they just said some like miscellaneous bugs. With like scripting and things like that of events not triggering correctly. They got models they've been able to like import models into the game now, so they can actually what it looks like is that there's a bunch of models in the files that are not in the actual game or something, or in the build, but it looks like now that they can actually get, quote, static meshes to load, unquote. And they've been hard at work creating them and populating levels. So there's a bunch of stuff in there. They're making skeletal meshes, and they're working on getting rigged mesh support for animations and stuff. There's, I guess, a flashback level that I don't remember from the build, but I guess there's a level where you flash back to Duke 3D, and they made a new pistol, which is based off of the original Duke 3D pistol for that level, just for that level, and also making a few changes to the level design to improve it a bit. Also, there's going to be a launcher. They're working on new graphics. They opened voice things. I took a quick look at the actual casting call club page, and it looks like it's mainly for main characters so far. So if there's like a side character or something, just like a random NPC, I'd love to do that. Yeah, this is great. This is such a cool... I said, what did I say? You can go back to that episode. You can see, you can hear me. I was like, in a few months or something, I guarantee there's going to be something crazy come out of this. Something like super extravagant. I was like, yeah, people are going to make entire games with this engine. And this like level designer and creator and all that. And guess what? It's happening. So if there's interesting updates, I will let you guys know about it, because this is actually a project I am very interested in. They found the 1998 Duke Nukem Forever theme. So yeah, I guess it was in the files. Oh, Oh no, they got it from. So, let's see. So the original, so the Duke Nukem thing, bum 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 bum. It's called Grab Bag. It was composed by James Grote from Gigadeath. For oh no, he composed that just for no. It wasn't composed by him for the excuse me, for Duke 3D. It was composed specifically. Well, who did the original one for Duke 3D? Oh, Duke 3D composer. Sorry, I'm all over the place. Lee Jackson. Right. Lee Jackson also did Rise of the Triad. Another great soundtrack. So that was the original theme. There was, I guess, one point in time in the late 90s where so I guess early into development, I guess after, this probably would have been one of the first things that they got made. They, I guess, commissioned James Grote from Gigadeath? That's overlapping with Megadeth in my mind. Gigadeath. Is that just Megadeth? I don't know why they say Gigadeath. Anyway, James Grote. Doing a lot of Googling. I'm just saying like a web developer on this. Anyway, musical artist. Oh. Is he done? I'm going to do a little dive. James Grote, founder and CEO of Brain Fever Media, visual effects apps for Mac and iOS. Did he? I guess he did music at some point. I legit thought I legit read it as Megadeth at first. Anyway, they got this guy to recompose the theme, Grab Bag, and it was never fully released because obviously that version of the game never came out. And they just emailed him, and they got a high-quality .wav file of the theme. Boom, 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 boom. So yeah, go listen to that. That's cool. And they just keep making work on this thing. Yeah, go check this out. This is super cool. I'm very pleased. I'm very pleased that this is like a thing now. This is beyond my wildest predictions. That this, first of all, this build came out and that so much work has been done on it. But God bless. I want to talk about some games. So I finished up Dawn of War, Warhammer 40k Dawn of War, the original campaign. I was surprised how short it was, and then it ends on a cliffhanger. But I was like, okay, time to go play the expansions now. My final thoughts on Dawn of War, I talked about it in the live episode, but I enjoyed it. I had fun with it. I'm not usually an RTS guy, but it's something that I enjoyed. There's a simple pleasure in building up a huge number of units and just throwing them at an enemy until it falls over. There's a very simple power fantasy with that, I guess. I don't know, that's how I would describe it. The appeal. From what I understand, Dawn of War 2 is like super different. It's much more like moment to moment based rather than base building up lots of troops and resources and stuff. And then Dawn of War 3, I went with a weird thing with Dawn of War 3, where I just heard people say that it sucked, and I didn't know why. And I saw someone made a video, it was like a documentary on Dawn of War 3, and I was like, oh, maybe now I can understand why everyone hates this game. And the video did not answer my questions at all. It mainly focused on like the marketing and the aesthetics, which is like, okay, fair. and there was like it was like a 35 minute video, and like maybe 5 minutes total was focused around the design. And I was like, all the critique was they made it like a MOBA. I was like, okay, but how? Oh, there's lanes? Can I see? It was all very vague, and like I don't understand what makes this game's like gameplay actually worse. And I came away from that video feeling very confused. And then I watched a much, in my opinion, video that I enjoyed much more. That was much better. From Adam Millard, aka the Architect of Games. I came at it from much more of like a game design standpoint, and I feel like I actually understood. Basically, from what I understand, I'm just going to go on a quick tangent about my understanding of why Dawn of War 3 sucks. Dawn of War 1 and 2 are very different games that have very different styles, where Dawn of War 1 is very macro, building bases and collecting resources, building up big, like, collections of units and all that, and then, like, there's tactics in it. There's definitely tactics, but the tactics are more overall, like, where do you choose to build your buildings? What kind, like, you know, where do you approach from, right? The actual, like, combat is mostly automated, and maybe sometimes you'll use, like, an active skill from, like, one of your commanders or, like, you know, leader units. Dawn of War 2 is way different and is much more focused on like having a small number of squads without really much base building at all, but much more involved moment-to-moment combat with like a very in-depth system of cover where the environment that you're fighting in and where your different troops are positioned is very important. So a lot of people like that, but it is very different from the first game. And so with the third game, they tried to seems like they kind of tried to combine both styles, but kind of like canceled each other. They kind of canceled each other out, where the base building is extremely minimal and unimportant, and there isn't really any point in like building up defenses for your base or anything like that, like in Dawn of War 1. And then also, you create so many units that if they were to do like the same kind of really in-depth cover system as the second game, it would just be a mess because of like how the maps would have to be designed and all that. So the solution they came up with was, we'll have you throw down a bubble, and the bubble protects you from ranged attacks. So it was just like very watered down systems because of the way that they chose to go about like balancing how you played the game, and then also dramatically simplified the way that the different factions worked, where they basically just turned it into StarCraft. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So it's like the same abilities across pretty much every faction with maybe one unique one for each. And I was like, okay, that sounds kind of lame. I don't want to play that. But then when I hear like Warhammer fans talk about why they didn't like the game, it's like he shouldn't be able to do a somersault in power armor. That should be impossible. I'm like, really? This is why you hate the game? Because the guy does like a front flip? Because a Space Marine does a front flip in power armor? That's why you hate this game? It's not lore accurate. That ruined the entire thing, really? Yeah, that was like, okay. I found the Adam Millard video much more helpful in actually understanding what was so boring about the game. That's one of the things, like, I really annoys me is people repeating vague critiques of something, and I'm trying to figure out what they mean in specific terms, and they just will not be any more specific. It'll just be vagaries. That's always annoying. Anyway, back to Dawn of War 1. The game's pretty fun. So I am kind of pushing through there's 3 expansions. I'm pushing through the first one right now, Winter Assault, which makes the Guardsmen playable. I really like the Guardsmen. They're one of my, I would say they're one of my favorite factions in 40k, and their depiction in the game is pretty similar to how it's how I imagine they would be, based off of lore and the tabletop and all that. The Guardsmen are just power in numbers. They never give up. They have very fragile individual units, but they have so many, and they've got heavy artillery and stuff like that. And they play pretty much like that in Winter Assault. They're very cheap to produce, and they you can make a lot of them, but they're very squishy. So I've been playing through that. There's 2 campaigns. I've been playing through the Order and Chaos ones. I've been playing through the Order one first, which is weird because Order and Chaos is more of like a Warhammer Fantasy thing, and not as much a 40k thing. There aren't really like... Order is not real... I don't know how much order there is in the 40k universe, but that's what they decided to call it. So I've been pushing through that. Now that the video's done, and I have that out, and I don't have to spend all day stressing and working on it, I'll probably try and see if I can finish that up and get on my way through the Chaos campaign, because I am really enjoying the gameplay. I really like the setup of the different missions, where it feels like they're kind of slowly establishing... I don't know, it's very solid, like, establishing concepts. Because there's some new concepts introduced in this expansion, not just the... not just like the Guardsmen themselves and the different way that they work, because they work in a way that's different and not... it takes a little getting like used to, at least for me, because like the vanilla games factions the armies have kind of they've got differences in their special abilities, the types of units that they can produce, the kind of specifics of those units and all that, like damage mounts and health and such. But in terms of like upgrading, every faction kind of gets like a different way of upgrading, which I thought was neat. Like, basically just, the factions are not just reskins of each other in Dawn of War, which is appreciated. And so to kind of like further develop that, the Guardsmen work totally differently from the other ones, where they don't like add... You can add like leader units, but they have like a hero unit, and the hero unit is actually like a squad. So it's like the what is it, like the commander or something? I forget exactly what it's called, but it's like the commander, and then you can actually add other units to him, like a commissar and a psyker and a librarian, and then they form like a small squad of their own. And like each one you add up like gives it like a new ability. So like you get I think the commander on his own has like an airstrike power, but if you get like a psyker, then you can take control of like you can like put a curse on machines, enemy vehicles and stuff, that will let you like control them for a bit, which was very useful in one specific mission of this game, because dear God, they ramped the difficulty way up for fucking Winter Assault. I was shocked. The first few aren't too bad, but it gets to a point. There's one where it's basically like the Eldar and the Guardsmen are cooperating with each other, and the Eldar they like teleport. They have to teleport their base away because they're getting overrun by orcs. So you have to then switch control to the Guardsmen and defend them for a bit, and then after you defend them, they have to like teleport. They have to like finish teleporting over, and then you have to defend them for like 10 minutes from an orc onslaught. And this is like harder than anything in the base game. There's so many fucking orcs. There's so many fucking orcs. There's so many of them. The orcs aren't too bad, but the main thing is that they just start throwing in these tanks, and these tanks fuck you up, dude. These tanks murder you. Oh my god. Just, there's like a certain point, I think it's like 4 minutes in, or sorry, at the 4-minute mark, where they just start throwing tanks at you. And then I would just start losing every single time. I'm like, what the fuck do I do? And then I found out I had to go. I was like, this is impossible. So I looked up a walkthrough. At which point I found out that the commander squad, like the command squad, if they have a psyker, you can just like cast like a curse on an enemy vehicle and just turn off all their weapons and then control them and walk them into your base to get dogpiled on. I was like, oh, and after that it wasn't too bad. Yeah, so I'm having fun with that. It's fun to explore new genres that I haven't explored very much before. I also picked up for really cheap on the Steam sale. I wouldn't have really picked it up otherwise. Mechanicus, 40k Mechanicus, which is kind of an XCOM-like. I have played the original XCOM a little bit, and I just kind of got a little... It's just a little too hard. It's just too hard. I don't know. Maybe I'm a baby, but it was very hard and slow. I liked the atmosphere, but... the actual experience, I've only got 8 hours into it, and I just figured, I'm like, I've had enough. I'm just fucking dying. It's very stressful. Yeah, I might have some more updates on that as I delve through some more strategy genres. Because honestly, I'm not a big strategy gamer, but like 70% of the friggin' Warhammer games library is just strategy games, so I am forced to deal with it. I'm forced to explore new things and maybe have fun. Right! Probably the last thing I want to talk about. Recently, I did something that I've been meaning to do for a while, and I replayed Dusk on hard. I did a hard mode playthrough of Dusk, or you know, it's a boomer shooter, so they've all got to have cute little names for their difficulties. So the hard mode is Cero Miedo. No fear. Dusk is one of my... I would call it's always vied for a spot in my favorite games list. And I first played it back in 2020. I've loved it ever since. And I've always wanted to like replay it. I'm really bad at it. I never like replay games because I just want to go on to the next thing, and I just want to get the next... How would I say? I don't replay things. I don't really rewatch things either, because the way I consume media is very much like I'm here for the interesting ideas, and then once I'm finished, once I've sucked the marrow out, so to speak, for my own mind, then I'm done. I move on to the next thing to give me the next interesting idea. So after I was done with it, I was like, that was great. But I played it on normal, and I always wanted to go back and play it on a harder difficulty to maybe just get something more intense out of it. So I finally did that. I've been picking away at it. It took me 3 or 4 sittings to finish it entirely. But yeah, it is... Have my thoughts changed about... Have my thoughts on the game changed after I replayed it? Sort of. It's very interesting to go back because despite it being harder technically, it felt way easier. And that might just be because of my familiarity with it, but I really had no problem at all plowing through this game. it was really not as tense as I thought it was going to be. And even parts that I thought were just incredibly, ridiculously unfair in a fun way on the first playthrough were really not that hard. I guess sort of spoilers, but the penultimate level is it's a series of waves of enemies in different like configurations. And I remember playing that the first time, and it was brutal. It was so hard to get through this whole thing. Excuse me. And then on my replay on the harder difficulty, I was like, there's only one wave that's actually difficult. There's only like one actually hard wave, and it's the one that spawns all the guys who throw the homing fireballs. That's the only one. All the other ones are pretty easy. You can just let them infight and stuff. It was nice going back through and kind of getting to experience the game's atmosphere again. I think that's one of the things that it does really well. Dusk is very... Fuck? Oh. Dusk is very... backwoods horror, I would describe it as. It's a setting that you don't see a lot of in games, where it's like it's very redneck. it's kind of a Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of setting that sort of evolves in these weird ways. It's very backwoodsy, so I would describe it. And very much inspired by Blood in several ways, in tone, and also in set. I mean, I always thought the first episode of Blood had a very similar kind of setting to it. It's sort of it takes place somewhere in the countryside. Blood is very vague about, the plot, but it's kind of like a European countryside. Very rural and isolated and spooky feeling. It's always dark. You don't see daylight in Dusk till like the second episode, I think, or like really late in the first episode, if that. I remember seeing I would being like, oh, it's daytime. It's daylight. I remember reading Dave Zemansky's... Which Dave is it? Fuck, I always get the Daves mixed up. For which one owns New Blood and which one made Dusk. Herman. I think it's Zemansky. It is Zemansky. Dave Oshry owns New Blood. Dave Zemansky, I remember he made a Twitter thread a little while back on things that people might like to... criticisms people had of the original Dusk. And one of the ones that I remember seeing was that every enemy is projectile-based and there's no hit scan enemies. And I think that is it was an interesting choice, but I think it kind of leads to the game having a little easier, I guess. Hit scan enemies, they can be annoying, but they give you that ability to be really unforgiving with the player. Where you can throw, Blood will do this, where they'll just throw so many, the fodder enemies of that game are all like hit scanners. I say they're fodder, but they're more just like glass cannons. The shotgunners and the Tommy gunners do an insane amount of damage instantly to you. And it lets the developer be kind of cruel. I think that, what I like, and not everyone likes this, but what I like in an FPS is when the game kind of forces me, when they're a little mean, when they're just kind of unfair to the player, because it forces you to get better, basically. Better at combat, shooting and moving. And Dusk definitely has some of that. There's some great sequences in Dusk. I forgot how much I loved the first level of episode 2. There's just this great segment that takes up kind of the back half of that level, where it's just like it's one environment, it's one area that is enclosed, but it's fairly big. And there's a bunch of interesting like little buildings around it, and you're just kind of running around. There's like an initial set of enemies that you have to kill, and then you explore it a little bit. You find a key, more enemies spawn like out of other buildings. You kill them, you go in those buildings that open, and it's just like you can run around, you could shoot things, you could strafe, and you have like enough freedom. Like it plays it reminded me of, and what it cemented more in my mind, this replay did, is it reminded me how good Dusk plays, at least at its best. How good it plays when it's just giving you like an open area with lots of enemies to like take out, but still like kind of interesting terrain to force you to taking certain paths. It's so much fun. I love how freaking fast you can go if you like strafe diagonally and like bunny hop. You go so fast, and just like zooming around and then just like turning and shooting and taking out a guy with like one shotgun is so good. It's such a satisfying feeling. The gameplay feels so, the combat is so tight in Dusk. I love it. It took me a minute to get used to, just because all these kind of shooters they sort of feel different. I usually takes like the first level or two to kind of get acquainted with the difficulty, but or not with the difficulty, but with just the way that movement feels and shooting feels. But once I was in it, and once I'd acclimated to the way the game feels again, just wonderful. The arsenal is very basic. It's very stock standard for this kind of game, with a couple interesting. It's decent. It feels good, which is important. But in terms of like interesting weapon concepts, there's only really one that I can think of, which is the crossbow. The crossbow shoots these magic arrows that they go through walls and enemies. So you can like take out enemies that are like above you, through like floors and stuff. You can like get some really satisfying moments where there's a bunch of enemies in a line and you just with the crossbow through them. That's cool. I also really like using the hunting rifle, which is just kind of a it's just a sniper rifle. It's not the craziest thing. But it does feel good too. And it kind of gives you something because there aren't very many long-range weapons that are reliable. The machine gun has like a big spread, so using it at a distance is kind of like kind of hit or miss, literally. So the hunting rifle kind of balances it out by giving you like a high damage kind of sniper, or almost more like a rail gun in the way that it works. Although you can zoom in. So it's in concept that the arsenal is it's super solid in that it feels good. Every weapon fits. Every weapon fits a function in the game, and it's very well rounded. It isn't like, I don't know, Quake, for instance, where they like have two weapons that are just worse versions of other weapons that you will never use after you get the better ones. It doesn't have that problem. I guess there's like the pistols, which are kind of meh, but even I found myself using them for like ammo conservation and stuff like that. There's Dusk. What's really interesting about Dusk is that it manages to be a really like, I would say, I was gonna say solid, but I think it exceeds really well at being like a power fantasy. We're gonna use that term again. And at the same time, it's a really effective horror experience. Like, there were moments, even having played this game before, there's several moments on my replay where I legitimately got spooked again. And there's some actually scary segments. There's an enemy called the Wendigo, and it's kind of like, I guess, one of the marquee enemy of the game. Basically, the way the Wendigo works is it's like a weird deer. It's like a humanoid with like a deer skull head, and it just kind of runs towards you and it does a melee attack, but it's invisible until it takes damage, which means that, and it makes this terrible sound. It makes this terrible, like, heavy breathing sound. Which means that you will be going through a level in the dark with just like a little beam of light from your flashlight, and all of a sudden you'll see like a box move, and you'll hear this like and you're like, oh fuck, and you just scramble for like your machine gun or whatever is like the fastest thing that you could just spread to to reveal the Wendigo. And then after that, it's not too hard to take them out. It's like 2 shotgun or super shotgun blasts, but yeah, it's still scared me. It still spooked me. I'm also someone who gets more scared by audio than visuals, personally. Like, I remember when I was playing Silent Hill, the visuals would like spook me for a second. I would just be, scared that I was suddenly in danger. But what really, the worst parts of that game, scare-wise, was the points where I would already be tense because I'm in like a scary area, and the soundtrack has these, the Silent Hill soundtrack has those like sounds of scraping, banging metal and like industrial noises, like that kind of thing. And it was getting so loud, and I know in my mind that, like, I'm in an area, I'm in a room where I don't see there being like an obvious flag that I can set off to make a scary thing happen or to make an enemy appear or something like that. Like, I figured out how the way that the game was pretty much the way it worked, but excuse me. But the soundtrack, just the soundscape, I guess, in general, would get so overwhelming that I almost had to like pause it to just like gather myself again. Just the sound was so intimidating to me. It was too much. So the Wendigos kind of hit upon that same sort of vulnerability to like audio cues and stuff like that. Other thoughts from my Dusk playthrough. There were some things that annoyed me more on my replay, namely the way the game handles saves. As in, like, it's just like the little things. Like, the game doesn't have, it doesn't auto-save when you start a level. So if you beat a level and then go to the next one, it does not autosave. Which means that if you like beat the level and you're like, okay, great, time, I'm done for the session, and then you close out, you will have to redo whatever your last save from wherever your last save was in the previous level, probably, because it does not autosave. which got me a few times. I had to replay several, like, sections of levels in, like, the last 10-20% of them because I forgot to save at the start of the next one, which was annoying, but it's whatever. Are there other things that really stuck out to me as annoyances? Not exactly. It was more... there was this thing with the settings. There was totally a thing with the settings, wasn't there? I think I got annoyed that the way that I was naming my saves at first, I had to change this because I had this problem with it. I was naming them as, like, I would do like 1-2, like level, like episode 1, map 2, 1-2, and then like whichever save, like 1-2 space, and then like a 1 or 2 for whichever save it was, as I would go through it. I realized that when you hit the plus or minus signs on the keyboard, it causes the game to get like a border, like you would have on like old like Doom and shit, where like the game would have a border for running on smaller windows, or running on smaller like displays. So they would have like a border come in from the sides that was adjustable. And apparently it works even in the menus in Dusk. Even in the menus, you can change the border, despite the fact that it's like an in-game thing, and not a menu thing. So, and when you save, it also saves your settings. So I would, like, while I was saving it, I would hit like the minus symbol for like a dash, and it would cause the border to creep in, which I did not want. And as soon as I actually got back into the game as soon as I unpaused, I fixed it. But then when I reloaded my save, after I like died, the border was back. These are just nitpicks. These are just little things. Horror experience still holds up. The gameplay, the shooting definitely holds up. I wish there were more sections that just kind of let you run around and shoot things, because that was really fun. The game kind of goes towards a little more contained, slightly more contained areas. It's hard to do a horror experience in a big open field, kind of like E2M1 is in the game. So I see like why Zemanski kind of shifted more towards like enclosed areas, which are still fine, and there's still some good scares in there. The gameplay doesn't like fall apart or anything. It's just there's moments in this game that are really good, and they don't show up super often in that way. There's a lot of like different good moments in the game, but not a lot of repeats of that kind of like really free, where I just get to enjoy the combat kind of feeling. So I hope that for a sequel, which I believe is coming, I mean, it would be... Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much like his biggest game. And was big influence in the boomer shooter revival. What would I want to see? What would I want to see in a potential sequel after replaying it? I think throwing in hit scan enemies would be good. I think slightly more interesting arsenal would be cool. I mean, hey, if you're going to be taking inspiration from Blood, why not keep the whole alternate fire system? In Dusk, if you hold right click, it zooms in, which is fine, it's useful, it does feel good, but one of the cool things about Blood is that everything's got an alternate fire, and some of them, like, it makes some of the weapons really interesting. It would also potentially be a way to pare down the arsenal a little bit, just because Blood combines a single shot and a double shot shotgun into just one. You can choose to fire 1 or 2 barrels at a time, which is very useful. I'd like to see more more sections that just kind of let you really indulge in the combat. And what else? I want it to be harder. Which I think would maybe be a natural thing with more hit scanners and stuff, but I'd like it to be harder. I don't know if I have many other complaints. I think so many things in that game are done really well. There's no real parts. It's a very like consistent, high level of quality, with some really cool levels thrown in there. I was reminded of how cool the Escher Labs are. I do not want to spoil what the Escher Labs are. Just go play it. Play the game. Yeah. Dusk. Good game. Liked it a lot. Liked it on replay. I hope the sequel makes some improvements to an already good formula. Do I have anything else I really want to talk about? Not really. We're gonna cut it. We're gonna cut a little. Cut. I'm not really cut it short. We're at like an hour 45-ish, hour 40. So, if you have been listening this far, thank you so much. If you have questions, you can leave them in the comments below, and I will definitely get to them next time, but please phrase them in the form of a question, because I'm not just going to read your thoughts out loud. I'm going to go eat something so that my brain might be a little more active. Maybe I should have done that before. I did eat my crackers. Oh, should I get some? We got some salsa in the house. I was like, pick up some salsa next time you're at the grocery. My brother was going grocery shopping, so I was like, pick up some salsa. We got some salsa. I've been indulging. I've been indulging in salsa. Made this great. I took some hash browns and I cooked them up, and I scrambled some eggs, and then I mixed those. I cut up the hash browns, and then I mixed it with the scrambled eggs, and then I put it in a tortilla, and I put some sour cream and some salsa on it. Oh my god. Oh my god. I'm getting hungry thinking about it. I'm gonna go eat. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for watching the videos. Subscribe to my Patreon, I guess. Bye.